We're absolutely surrounded by metrics, right? They drive our decisions, they define what success looks like, and they honestly shape our reality. But what happens if the very numbers we put so much trust in are actually leading us down the wrong path? Today, we're going to dig into when metrics lie and how the act of measuring something doesn't just describe reality, it actively changes it.
You know, it all starts with this core belief, and it's practically drilled into us, especially in tech. Engineers trust numbers. We're taught that numbers are the language of logic, the very foundation of everything we build. In a world that's messy and complicated, they feel solid, reliable, safe. But what happens when that trust is broken? What happens when the numbers we lean on so heavily start to deceive us? When our dashboards are screaming that everything is fine, but the reality for our users, for our systems, is something else entirely? Well, that's the big conflict we're getting into. So, how do we even get to a place where our own metrics are lying to us? Well, it all starts with their incredible power. We are just drawn to numbers because they feel so objective. Think about it. A good metric, it seems like it's free from all that messy human bias, right? It feels precise, like it's giving you this crystal clear picture of the world. It looks neutral, like it's just a simple fact. And because of all that, we end up treating our metrics like they are facts. But here's the crucial twist, the big reveal. Metrics aren't pure facts, not even close. They're proxies. They're just stand-ins for a reality that's way, way more complex. They're simplifications, boiling down this really nuanced world into a single digit. And maybe most importantly, they are just our own assumptions, frozen into the shape of a number. And this brings us to our first really critical takeaway. The moment you decide to measure something, let's say you're measuring user engagement by how many times people click, you are, at that exact same moment, deciding that other things like maybe user frustration or the quality of that click, they just don't matter as much. Every metric you choose hides a ton of context. This leads us straight into something called the measurement trap. This is the point where our reliance on metrics, our trust in them, actually starts to work against us. And it's all governed by a very, very powerful principle. And that principle is Goodhart's law. This is such a vital concept to understand. It basically says that as soon as you start using a metric for something important, like bonuses or promotions or just defining what success is, the second it becomes a target, it stops being a good measure of what you originally cared about. And here's why that's so important. People and systems will naturally start optimizing for the metric itself, not for the goal that metric was supposed to represent. If you tell a sales team they get a bonus based on the number of calls they make, guess what? You're going to get a ton of really short, low-quality calls, but not necessarily more sales. The system starts chasing the number, not the intent. So how exactly does this happen? Well, metrics start lying to us in a few key ways. For one, they're often slow. They lag behind reality, telling you about a problem way after it's already started. They also average away the really extreme pain that's felt by a small group of your users. They hide what we call tail risk, those rare but totally catastrophic events. They reward shortcuts that make the number look good but hurt quality in the long run. And eventually, they can become completely detached from what a real person is actually experiencing. And here is a really dangerous paradox for you. The more we trust a metric, the more we build our entire world around it, our processes, our incentives. The more devastating the damage is when that metric finally starts to drift away from reality. That blind faith is the biggest risk of all.
All right, so this brings us to the central battle for pretty much any team out there. The huge, growing gap between what the dashboard says and what reality is. It's what our tools are telling us versus what our users are actually feeling.
Just take a look at this. On the left, you've got the dashboard view. Everything is green, the averages look healthy, throughput is high. It looks perfect. But then you look at the user's reality on the right, frustrating lag, confusing error messages, and just this slow breakdown of trust. The dashboard is lying. It's just flat out lying.
So why? Why does this happen? Well, it's because most of the real, sharp user pain doesn't show up in your averages. It lives out in the tails of the distribution, the 95th or 99th percentile. Sure, your average response time might look great, but if even 1% of your users are stuck waiting 10 seconds for a page to load, you have a huge problem that the average is completely hiding from you.
These kinds of problems usually fall into a few common buckets. You've got vanity metrics, the ones like total app downloads. They look great on a slide, but they tell you nothing about how many people are actually using the thing. Then there's proxy drift, where your metric just slowly stops meaning what it used to mean. You have local optimization, which is when one team does something great that actually breaks the whole system. And of course, there's just straight up gaming the numbers, people finding clever ways to hit the target without hitting the goal. And this leads us to another fundamental truth we just can't ignore. Metrics aren't just passively watching what's happening. No, they are active players in the game. They are incentives in disguise. What you choose to measure is what you are choosing to reward. And that choice directly shapes how people behave. Period. Okay, so we spent a lot of time on the problem. So what do we do? How do we fix this? The answer isn't to just throw our hands up and stop measuring things. The answer is to start measuring with a little bit of humility, to really understand the limits and the traps. So here are a few practical things you can do to build healthier systems. First, use metrics that balance each other out. Like if you measure new signups, you also have to measure how many people are leaving. Second, please stop looking only at averages. Monitor the whole distribution. Look at your P95s and P99s. Third, make sure your metrics are tied to actual user outcomes, not just some internal number. Fourth, and this one is huge, you have to constantly question the assumptions behind your metrics. And finally, treat them as signals, as clues that tell you where to look, not as the absolute final truth. You can really boil this entire philosophy down to a single idea. When a metric changes, whether it's good or bad, that shouldn't be the end of the story. It should be the beginning. It should be the thing that makes you ask why. A metric should never, ever be used to shut a conversation down. The moment someone drops a number on the table like it's the final word, that's when you know you're in a dangerous place. So let me give you maybe the most practical piece of wisdom in all of this. If you have a flood of user complaints telling you something is broken, but your dashboard is all green and says everything is fine, who are you going to believe? The answer has to be reality. You have to trust the human experience over the number every single time. And this is the final warning. The moment an organization stops being skeptical of its own data, the moment it just accepts the dashboard as the ultimate truth, that's when it becomes fragile. That's when it gets disconnected from the very people it's supposed to be serving, and that is the most dangerous place to be. So let's end with this. Metrics are incredibly powerful tools. They help us focus, they drive behavior, they're essential. But they are not reality. So use them, learn from them, let them guide you, measure everything you can, but never ever worship the numbers. That is the real path to understanding your systems and, more importantly, your users.